Trump says the U.S. will charge semiconductor tariffs of about 100%, but not for companies that build in the U.S. Subdeck, specifics were lacking. I think you can say that about a lot of Trump policies. First few lines of the article here, U.S. President Donald Trump says he plans to levy an approximately 100% tariff on all chips and semiconductors coming to the United States. However, companies that are building or planning to build in the country will not be made to pay. Timelines for the long-threatened semiconductor tariffs were not shared. Of course, this came yesterday after the news of the large investment into the U.S. from Tim Apple, aka Tim Cook of Apple. And so that just kind of signals to you that the Trump administration is going to keep bonking on corporations' heads, get them to move into the US. For Bitcoin miners, obviously, it's like, okay, how is this going to impact the cost of bringing in electrical equipment, mostly ASICs, into the US? We've already seen a lot of the tariffs have kickback effects, I guess I'll say, for Bitcoin miners. I'll let Colin get into the specifics there a little bit more in a second, but we've seen the prices of ASICs go up around 15, 20% plus as the end up purchaser of the ASIC has to take up on that tariff. And now with the semiconductor part of it, if the semiconductor is being made, say, in Taiwan and then packaged into a Bitmain unit that's built in Indonesia, you're just picking up all those additional marginal costs. But the silver lining here is maybe there's other ways to build out the manufacturing landscape here in the future. There's a few Bitcoin miners we know who are already trying to build in the US, if not just assemble. So, Colin, I want to throw it to you, though, and get some more thoughts on this story.
I'm kind of confused by it, and I would want to see more guidance. But like, if you're importing chips, then doesn't that necessarily mean that you are going to be building whatever the chip powers in the US? So what's the exemption if you're building in the US? Maybe I'm being totally smooth-brained about it, but are they saying that they are going to put 100% tariff on the chips themselves for any devices that come into the US, or is it just the chip standalone? Because if you're importing the chips, then necessarily you would assume that they are going to be integrated into something that is in a US manufacturing process, right? Like, am I making sense?
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I think we can look at one of his statements and then we'll have to wait because that's all this stuff goes. But he says, quote, even though you're building and you're not producing yet, in terms of the big number of jobs and all the other things you're building, if you're building, then there will be no charge. So if you can understand that statement from Trump, which I don't think a lot of people can, then you're good. But I think from a perspective of just the silicon itself and the semiconductors, like they're trying to bring that investment onshore here. And, the Biden administration did this as well, but they did that with more of a carrot. Trump's doing more of a stick. The carrot was the Inflation Reduction Act back in, I think that passed in 23.
You mean the CHIPS Act?
Oh, the CHIPS Act, yeah.
Yeah.
The CHIPS, mixing up my Biden era acts. The CHIPS Act helped onshore some of these things, and that's where you saw the huge Arizona TSMC facility get underway. And now it's the other way. They're going to hit you with the tariff.
But the stocks that you would expect to react negatively to this, like NVIDIA and Apple, haven't really been shaken up too much. And I wonder if that's just because investors are not totally sure whether or not this is the final version of this. They're waiting for, kind of a clearer explanation of what exactly this is. But we've seen this with, I think, all the tariffs, right? One rate gets announced, they backpedal or they change it, negotiations go underway, and then they will have a final rate or a kind of clearer guidance for specific countries as a result of those negotiations. I think the market is definitely fatigued from a lot of the tariff stuff. And I think that investors and traders are starting to look at these things as not the final word with regards to some of the trading policies. So definitely worth looking into a little bit further and us keeping our ear to the ground for it. But I would just say, I don't think they can meaningfully do very much when it comes to semiconductors, because it's just like that we don't have anything in the US that matches what Taiwan's doing with TSMC. These chips are the backbone, or rather the brain, I should say, of basically every electronic device we use at this point. I don't think there's much wiggle room for them. So
cool. Any thoughts, Matt?
The immediate market reaction was a rise in share price for NVIDIA, Apple, and TSMC. I haven't dug deep into the details of the tariff itself, but the headlines were that they're heavily riddled with exemptions, and the fact that the market reacted that way makes me think that this is not as potentially big of a deal as it sounds, particularly for U.S. companies. The Trump campaign's been very clear, the administration that is, that they want more U.S. manufacturing. So yeah, to your questions earlier, Colin, that might be exactly the case, right? They tariff chips on the way in, but if you're building in U.S. manufacturing plants in the States, that it doesn't matter. But my instinct would say that the manufacturers of ASICs, bringing it back to the mine industry, that have a strategy in the U.S. Would be kind of insulated from this, like those right, Orodyne's here, right, and
the IP is here, but the actual fabrication is
right,
in
they're
undisclosed
here.
Locations, probably in Southeast Asia.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of the episodes we put out. Also, check us out on Spotify, Apple, and elsewhere.